commandant, the officials of Dachau, the different levels of who were the guards and everything. So we're not 100% sure, but we think it was the commandant that was in the basement, and he was the son of this woman who ran the bakery, who wanted to turn her son over to the American soldiers so that he wouldn't be hurt by the inmates who were rioting down the streets. So she stops my father, but she doesn't know he speaks fluent German, even with the same accent, because he's from an hour away. So he could hear the conversations between the son and the mother, so he knew it was mother and son, and he thinks it was the commandant. So he actually took him under control and put him on the front of the Jeep and said to him in German that, there's these piano wires that they were tying between the trees. His Jeep didn't have that bar in the front that would be able, so he goes, by the way, you're our bar. If there is any wires, you're going to get it first. But he didn't, and then my father did turn him over to the Americans. And at the end of the war, my father got into Stars and Stripes because he did these type of things a lot. At the end of the war, in the beginning of the war, when the Americans were there, he wasn't really, if he ever had to go on duty or something, they go, what's the password? He'd go, wait a minute here, the rabbit jumps over the fence. And they go, oh God, and several times, everyone else in his platoon got killed, and he was alone. If you jumped off those boats into the water, well, the tall people, their head is above water, and they have your gun, so you don't get your gun full of water, and then you run up on the beach, and then the Nazis shoot you. Well, if you're really short, and you jump into the water's over your head, so you throw away the gun, you throw away your knapsack, and you swim. And then the water carries you a little bit downstream, and then you come crawling out, and everyone else is shot, and you're still alive. So, but then you have to go, how do I get back? I want to find the Americans. I don't want to find the Germans because they'll put me back in Dachau or kill me. So my father would always have this problem where his colonel kept on saying, even after the war was over, people could go on leave, don't go on leave. Because he kept on getting into trouble every time he tried coming back because of his accent. But on the other side, when he was capturing new towns, they would ask him to find wine, women, and hotel. So my father, wherever Hitler stayed, knew it was a good hotel. So he would book these places for the generals. So my father was 25 years old, whatever, and he would take over the hotel. Well, the phone rang once. So he lifts up the phone and he goes, "Hello, Heil Hitler." And it was the head of the Wehrmacht from that area. And the guy saying, "Are the Americans there?" "Nein, nein, we're playing cards. We have some women, come on over." So my father captured, with his other 2 or 3 people there, they captured the head of the Wehrmacht from that area without a bullet being shot. So he has a lot of medals. And in his last year of his life, he was beginning to get a little bit of dementia. And he took all of his medals and he put them on in a framed thing on the wall, but then he was afraid people were going to steal them. So he was hiding these things, but I found everything now. But in his whole life, he was never really all that into being a military soldier. But in the end, he was. And at the funeral, they actually gave us an American flag because he was a veteran. So the war, okay, so now we'll get to the next. So Colonel Porter says you can take a Jeep to find out if your family's alive. But you're never going to find Augsburg. We blew the crap out of this city. And my father goes, I'll find my house. So the roads were bad, but he took the Jeep. He finds his house. Everything is bombed out, whatever. So he goes to the landlord who owns the office for his father's business and rings the doorbell and asks, and the woman answers the door. Now you have to picture, Heinz is now Henry, with a gun and an American Army uniform. So when they answered the door, they were a little bit at first taken back. And then my father says, "Nein, ich bin ich Heinz." So they go, oh, and then the woman says, your family's gone. They were all deported. But your Aunt Minna filled up a suitcase with photographs and letters for her daughter. Her daughter was part of the Kindertransport that was sent to London. And Minna didn't know where to mail any letters to, so she wrote a letter every day. She never mailed it, she put it in the suitcase. So, with the photographs, and she said, if anyone ever comes back, give them the suitcase. So my father says, I'm in the middle of a war still, I can't take the suitcase. Now, I do not know if this is that suitcase. This is the suitcase I know about when I tell you about my bar mitzvah story. But it could be. When I asked my father, he goes, do you think I remember from the suitcase? But it would look like that. This is the type of a typical suitcase from that era. So what happened, though, is my mother's father, after my mother and father got married in 1947, went back to Germany. He brought the Torah that we had here. He also brought back the suitcase. So those letters and all were given to what I call Aunt Anne, although she really wasn't my aunt, but she grew up in the household with my parents as if, and with my father as if she was like a sister. And so she got to see the pictures and the letters from her mother, but Minna Wolf died in Auschwitz. That one, we know when the deportation was. So now I want to then, so the war is now over. Daddy sees the suitcase. He's the first American to enter Augsburg. They get to go to Salzburg, whatever, and the war's over. But now to leave, you got to go back to London to get on the ship to come to America. So he comes back to London, and the lawyer's house is all bombed out. So my father sends like chocolates and stockings and those type of things to the lawyer because they had nothing. So that's the end of World War II. Now I'll just segue on that one thing. I knew the name Charles Hawken. And in 1996, 6 years into starting Gay and Lesbian Children of Holocaust Survivors, I get invited by Sir Ian McKellen to go to the University of London for a symposium on what happened to the gays during the Holocaust. Because they thought I started Children of Gay Holocaust Survivors. Not gay children of Jewish Holocaust survivors. So I'm at that conference, and then when they introduce me in the wrong thing, whatever. But I go to the phone book and I call up Charles Hawken. Regina Hawken, his wife, answers the phone. He was dead, Charles, but she kept his name. And oh, how is Henry? And oh, thank him so much for all this other type of stuff and all. And she goes, by the way, what do you do? And I said, I'm a lawyer. She goes, my son David's a lawyer. So I said, okay, whatever, that's 96. Then around 2000 and something, I went to the movie theater on 2nd Avenue to see something else, and it was sold out. So I went to see Mrs. Henderson Presents. I don't know if people even saw that movie. Yeah. And it's about 1939, it's about London, and at the end, scrolls up David Aukin, A-U-K-I-N, executive producer. And the hair in the back of my head stands up. I go, I bet you that's his son. And you Google David Aukin, the producer. He went to Oxford Law School. So I track him down, and sure enough, it's the same guy. So I say to him, do you know my great-grandparents let your grandparents stay in their house when they were fleeing to Germany, to London, and your father saved my father by getting him out of Dachau. So we're talking, and he goes, fine. He goes, where do you live? I said, Tribeca. He goes, oh, my son is Daniel Aukin, the artistic director of the Soho Repertory Theater. So I got together with Daniel in my house, and I said, I'm writing a book. And I said, the end of the book would be great. We fall in love. And our true family. He goes, one problem. I said, what? He goes, I may be the artistic director of the Soho Repertory Theater, but my wife and kids in Brooklyn aren't going to really like that. So, nice try. But, so there's these weird coincidences of my life that just keep on happening. So now I'll segue on the suitcase. So when I was 13, that was a very important year in my life, 1965. Around April of that year, I'm in Hebrew school, and we're learning how boys and girls get married, stepping on the cup and all. And I raised my hand not knowing this is going to change my whole life. And I say, is there a bracha or something for two boys who want to get married? And Mr. Rosenberg goes, in the hall. Now, that June I will become the valedictorian in my Hebrew school class. I wasn't like, the clown or anything, He yelled at me so in that hallway. And by the way, I went last year and took a picture of the hallway. So I have that. It's still in my mind. No, never will a synagogue ever allow two Jews to get married. That'll only be a And as he's yelling at me, I'm saying to myself, that Torah that's in my closet that I'm supposed to donate at my bar mitzvah in June, you're not getting it. So I went home and spoke to Grandpa, and I said to Opa, what happened? I didn't tell him I was gay at that point. I said, what happens if I move to another synagogue? I promise you, and we went into a whole long talk, how it's not my Torah, that I'll bring it to the next shul. So we signed a contract that gave me 90 days notice to take the Torah back to bring it to another shul. That's how it got to CBST. And then God again shared with coincidences. When is my bar mitzvah? The last Shabbat of June, 4 years before Stonewall. So what we now call Pride Shabbat, I knew about that beforehand. So that was my bar mitzvah, was June 26th of 1965. And then in that summer camp, I was beginning to have enough guts to tell my camp counselor that I had a crush on Wayne, who was in the big bunk next to me. And he became an MSW years later in social work, and he did say to me, don't tell anyone in camp, but there's nothing wrong with it. When you get older, tell Wayne. And when he got older, I told Wayne, and Wayne and I are still friends, and Wayne actually invited me to his wedding when he married a woman. So, that was that year. Now, at my bar mitzvah, I don't know if people know Leonard's. I know you would know what Leonard's.
Yes.
Are.
I know.
Of great
Oh,
name.
Leonard's
Sure,
a great
absolutely.
You were bar mitzvah?
Absolutely.
I was bat mitzvah then.
Okay, you have been a mitzvah there. Well, anyway, so it's a factory that everyone who got bar mitzvah went to Leonard. So here I am, valedictorian in my Hebrew school, president of the Hebrew school class. And when I go, where's my bar mitzvah going to be? And they said, the backyard. And we have little houses in Floral Park. And I go, well, now they're tall and big, but they had a little backyard. So I said, how come everyone else goes to Leonard? So my father goes downstairs, and he comes back up with this suitcase. And he puts it in the living room on the sofa, and he opens it up, and he takes out, not this picture, this is a copy that I made, but he takes out the original that I already donated. And he goes, Ricky, you see these people here? This is our family. They would have loved to come to your bar mitzvah, but they didn't get out. So again, at 13, coming out seems to be very important. These people didn't come out. So again, at 13, they didn't say to you, this one died here, this one, because we didn't really know. But again, growing up as a child of Holocaust survivors, you get hit with these things. So that's why I didn't really have that many relatives, because they didn't get out. And these are the two Hasidic people. This is Gershon and Sophie. I guess I can also pass it around. So I think this is the picture that in wallet size my father had when he was in London. And no one is named after Sophie. Sophie died in Theresienstadt. So actually it's not even a few years ago now, it's probably 10 years ago at CBST, I did a baby naming, and I added Sophia to my Hebrew name. So my Hebrew name is Mordechai Sophia. Also for Sophia Petrillo from the Golden Girls. But it's also for Sophie, who is my great-grandmother, who no one was named after. So what is really funny is that I don't really go to Saturday services here at CBST that much. But when you go to an Orthodox shul, and they go, Yamod, what's your Hebrew name? Mordechai Sophia ben Chaim. Mordechai Sophia ben Chaim. So anyway, so that is the story of this suitcase. I don't know. I know for sure this is the suitcase from when I was 13, because it's been under my control and dominion in the house. Prior to that, was this the suitcase that they brought back from Germany with Minna Wolf stuff? I don't know. Or was this the suitcase that my father took to London and to America? I don't know. And I've checked everything to see if there's anything that's German or American on the stuff. I don't know. But anyway, one of the museums will get this, or I will just continue using this as my prop. Also, let's check on the time. All right. So those are the major stories of my father and how he got out and got to America and everything. Then I just want to give us just some stories. So he's a furrier, and that's 130 West 30th Street. I knew that building as the building next to the castle. And again, my dad is 134 West 29th Street. He had colleagues who made hats in that building. My father was a furrier who made Persian lamb and mink coats. So on Saturdays, you have to picture this. I was short at the time. So I was this little kid. Actually, yeah, I'm still wearing the same sweater since 1965. I would go to Washington Heights on Saturdays. In the fall, I would make deliveries with my dad, and then in the spring, we would make the pickups. So I would go in myself. He would drive me in the green Ford. I'd go into the building, go up to the third floor, push the button. They'd give me a nickel. I'd go like this. They'd put 2 or 3 fur coats on me. I'd walk it down, and we would throw it into the trunk of the car. And that was part of our business. The other thing is, during the rest of the year, I would go in to visit with my father, and I'm now going to do not an individual, I'm collectively putting together this following story. So a woman would come up and go, Henry, I'm a full-busted woman here, put over here. Now, when you get the coat you gave me, it's a little bit tight here, and when I go like these, it's a little bit short. And when I go like these, it's a little bit long. Henry, fix it. So I would look at my father like, I am never going to be a furrier. And take your hands off of those women's breasts. But so he would say to me, Rick, going to make a phone call. You go to the building next to the castle. You go to the 5th floor. You speak to Mo or Max, and he's going to give you 3 fur hats, and you bring him back, and you come in the back way, not the front, from the showroom. So he would get on the phone, he'd call up Max and say, Max, I got a dark brown Persian old goddamn coat here. Can you have 3 hats that sort of look like it's a mouton or whatever the thing was, and my son's going to pick it up in 5 minutes. So then I would run there, and I would get the hats, and then I would come back. And then my father had this big safe where you would keep the fur coats in. Now, it had metal conduits up and down the safe with a wire in it so that if anyone would cut the wire, the alarm would go off. So my father also had a bamboo rake that he would use maybe once every 5 years to clean up all those little pieces of animal fur and dirt but he had the rake there. So what he would do is he would take the coat, and actually for this story, so that it's actually more realistic, instead of a Persian lamb, which is mostly what he did, say it's a mink coat. And then he would say to the woman, for free, I'm going to steam your coat for you. And I think I have a hat that matches perfectly. And then he would say to me, Ricky, take the coat and throw it up in the air and catch it. And just keep on throwing it up in the air and catching it. And then my father took that rake and went up against the wall that had those metal conduits, and he would go, swoosh, swoosh. And it really sounded like you had a fancy steam machine. But my father had a rake. We couldn't afford a steam machine. And he didn't charge him. And then I was throwing the coat up and down, and then he would take the coat and shake it and go, so now it really looked good. And then he would take of the 3 hats, he said, this one looks the best. And then he would take it out and go, the designer who made this coat also made this hat. It goes beautifully with this coat. For you, I'll sell it to you. So she would buy the hat, She would be so happy she got a free steamed coat. And that's how he did his business. And that's how I also still never knew what. People would ask me, what does your father do for a living? I had no idea. Except I actually did know when I went to Buffalo in 1969, it was so cold that Daddy and I together, he made me a sable vest. And we did it together with the little scraps on the floor. They would, Pete, the finisher, we had this sewing machine. And he sewed the little pieces together to make a big piece. And then you take nails and you put them in your mouth. And then you take the nail and then you hammer it. You take this dirty water in a bucket with this type of brush, and you brush the back of it with filthy water. You stretch it out with the nails. Then you take the stapler, and you go boom, 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 and you staple it. And then you take a piece of pattern, and it's close enough. So that's the pattern. And then we make we made a fur vest. And then you go to Astoria, to the finisher, and then she would do sewing in the lining and do all that other type of stuff, and that's what his business was. So that's a little bit of how my father was a furrier. Other sort of just stories with that. I'll give you the, oh, it is getting close to 8, okay. I'll give you the last, I know you're not supposed to focus on the last few days of a person's life. You should focus on the 94 years, but I'll just give you the two last things. So Dad, we had discussed this, and he said he wanted to pass away at home. And I said fine, but he wasn't sick or anything. And then my mom calls me up on a Saturday at about 5 o'clock, and she says, you better come out here. I said, so you call 911. She says, I'm not calling 911, you call 911. So I took my first car service, out there. I was there in 40 minutes, and I spoke with Dad. And I said, well, maybe this isn't your time to die yet. So I said, can we go to the emergency room and nothing, we'll do nothing, bad, whatever. And we went to the emergency room. They said he's dehydrated, so they gave him a drip. And they said he has pneumonia, so they gave him antibiotics in the drip. And we stayed there for 24 hours, and by 7 o'clock the next night, they said his white blood cell count is in half. He's doing his bodily functions all by himself. You can take him home tomorrow. So we said, okay. And then my father goes, wait a minute. I came by ambulance. What do I have to do? Take a taxi to go home from here? So I said, no, Dad. I drove the car behind the ambulance. I have the car here. He goes, you better let me drive. You don't drive good when you're upset. So this is my dad on that night. And then he also said to me, come here. Tomorrow I'm going to Munich to see my mother. So again, I figured that's how he was towards the end. Sometimes he was totally lucid. Sometimes he was total. So I said, okay, fine. Tomorrow you'll see your mother in Munich. That was at 7 o'clock at night. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. Now, 25 years to the day, the phone rang at about 12:30, and it was my lover. And he jumped and killed himself at 2 o'clock in the morning from the Park Lane Hotel. That was December 29th of 1989, and I actually said Kaddish that Friday night and put on Facebook some pictures of my former lover because it was his 25th yahrzeit. And at 1 o'clock the doctor called up and said, do you want us to put pipes down and do compression? Your father's lungs are filling up with fluid. So I just said, let's get dressed, and my mom and I went in the car, which was also funny because the lights go on by themselves, because I don't know really how to drive at night in the dark. So we got there, and I kept on saying in my head, I can't believe. But when it went to past 2 o'clock in the morning, I said, oh good, he'll be all better, because he didn't die at 2 o'clock in the morning. But then the time came where I called my brother, who was a doctor, and I had him on the telephone, and I was just reading the numbers. I said, oh, this one's 90, 80, 60, 40, and Bob says, my brother says, he's not going to come out, that's it. So once we realized that, they were calling Code Blue, and all these people, like on television, start running in, and I went over to the doctor and I said, no, my mother is the healthcare proxy, and no. So we just took everything off, cleaned him up, held his hands, kissed him, and within 5 minutes he was gone. So in a way, I kept on saying, if people go, that's the way I would like to go. I can't be selfish and just keep people around. His time had come. But anyway, so then that next and then on that Wednesday we had a funeral, but we didn't have a minyan, and I didn't want any fights with any rabbis because I was going to say Kaddish anyway. So tonight we do have a minyan now, and we do have a rabbi. So I think now to end the program, if you want to get the other class to come in, fine. So see, we wanted to make sure we were minyan proof because I got so many people who couldn't come today. And I also want to thank, this is also for the camera, all those people who sent donations in my father's names. I thank all of you who I know and all the people who I don't know. I felt so touched that there are people who I didn't even know, who I guess know me from handing them books, to thank them. But in case there wasn't 10 people here for this today, we got the class that is coming. So I'll put on a yarmulke. And Rabbi Bauer will lead us in Kaddish, so we weren't able to say this officially, Dad, at the funeral, so we'll say it now. And that's Betsy Fleish's.
Page 150.
With your permission, Chair, I'm going to do an Elmo for
You can do
for
it.
those who died in the Shoah.
Okay, it's yours.
El Malei Rachamim is our prayer to that God take care of all those whom we have lost. And this is one particularly structured for all those we lost in the Shoah. El Malei Rachamim שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מסעירים, את נשמות כל אלה, שנהרגו בשואה. אנא בעל הרחמים, תסתירם בצל כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים, את נשמתם, ואנוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר Amen. Words of Wonders Kaddish are on page 150.
150.
Start us off.
Yizkadash
Shmei Rabbah, Yomad Yivrach Yerusei, Mi'amlich Malchusei, V'chayechon V'yomechon, V'chayei L'chol Beit Yisrael, V'hakala V'zman Kariv V'yivru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam L'amei Amaya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpahar V'yitzramam V'yitnaseh, Yizadar, Yizalev, Yizalal, Shmei, Kedusha, Urichu, Ve'ela, Mimko, Birchata, V'shirata, Tushbefata, V'nechemata, Damiram, Yoma, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba, Mishamaya, V'chayim, Aleinu, Ya'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, אמרו אמן.
So there's a flyer in the front. I spoke at the United Nations this week on the Holocaust and the LGBT rights of today, and the woman heard me and then asked me if I would speak at the Holocaust Museum in Battery Park City on the 26th. The story, you'll have to come because I didn't talk about the day I told my parents that I was gay and I was going to the March on Washington, and what my father's response to be is, I think, what I'm going to be saying at this program. So again, I thank all of you who came and all of you who came out from the classroom. And again, I was just very lucky to have my dad for 94 and a half years, and I'm very lucky to have my mom for 88 years and going. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you, Noli, for coming. His memory be with us.